Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube, back to continue my read-along for the Dark Shadows Daybook Unbound, written by Patrick McCrae. I'm still on Chapter 3, guys, Episode 633 and 634. When Nicholas presents Maggie as his satanic spouse and life force candidate, can Barnabas defeat him before his master race becomes a reality? Jonathan Friend. Nicholas conducts a black rite that bonds Maggie to him, takes her to become the life force for Eve. Barnabas, who is already horrified, is made even more so by Maggie's love-struck loyalty to Nicholas. As the experiment begins, Maggie's pain becomes unbearable to watch. Knowing that this is his only chance to end Nicholas once and for all, Barnabas smashes the electrical equipment, killing Eve at last, and sending a terrified and powerless Nicholas running. Barnabas gives pursuit with every intent to kill him, but Diablos claims Nicholas first. As Barnabas laughs at the spectacle, meanwhile, Maggie revives with Julia, but seems to be in a haze that is connected to her time as a prisoner in the old house. Will she remember at last? Adam escapes and charges into Collinwood, furious that his mate is no more. This is the one where Barnabas smiles. I mean, really smiles. I won't say he goes all Whoopi Goldberg in this episode, but he looks robustly happy when Nicholas explodes. I think it happens again in 1897 when he snookers Laura into a trap with the help of Angelique. Normally, Barnabas just looks deeply moved with sincere gratitude at those points when happiness might afflict others. This is one of my all-time favorite Dark Shadows episodes because of how much progress it shows. Not only does the plot leap with true irreversibility, but the characters change irreversibility as well. Barnabas has two great moments of morale awakening on the show. One is at the beginning of the Adam storyline, while this one is at the end. In this episode, the arc begins when Barnabas is left alone with Jeff Clark, who is about to be mutilated to soften Adam's appearance. He frees him. Although he knows it will probably squash his chances with Vicky, his moral compass is recognized for the first time, and Angelique began her campaign. Yes, he continues to help evil enterprises, but a bit like Julia at that point. It is under duress or to serve a larger end. It is in this episode that this stops. He has already selected to choose good over evil. Personally, but here it goes beyond selecting good actions for himself to preventing evil being visited upon others. All told, this is a hell of a journey to go on in what for Barnabas is about a year, not continuing suspended animation, or less from when Angelique cursed him. The cast is having a disciplined blast in this one, and the writers give them plenty of TNT. Humpert Allen Ostrato must have been well loved. His last episode begins with a satanic wedding ceremony and ends with him being consumed by hellfire. In between, he induces Coronius, gloats, wins, losses, and finds that his powers have been zapped. He does almost everything an actor can do in a 4-hour play, yet pulls it off in 23 minutes. Meanwhile, Catherine Leigh Scott plays both an icy occult loyalist and a spell-struck Josette as the whammy leaves her. She looks as if she's having a ball as well, and she works in two kinds of menace. Her Kool-Aid drunken loyalty to Nicholas motivates Barnabas by making him equally jealous and mortified. The man of the hour, however, is Jonathan Frid. Barnabas has spent months in hesitant apprehension. He run his hands so much I'm amazed he graduated from the show with any fingerprints left. However, here he gets months of a story finally explodes into seconds of resolution, and Frid seems more refreshed and energetic than he has in months. The production is wrapping up, sweeps and approaching final exams and Christmas break, making it a perfect time to introduce a more family-oriented story with Amy and Chris and lay the grounds for the next big thing, Quentin Collins. This episode was broadcast November 27th, 1968. Episode 660. Barnabas may be able to defy the centuries to save Victoria, but can he defy Julia? Julia Grayson Hall. Spurred by a photo that Quentin had David plant, Barnabas is convinced that he should go back in time and save Victoria Winters from being hanged as a witch. Stokes and Julia voice doubts, but the appearance of Grace from the past convince him that he must proceed. Finding purpose, it's an onus for everyone, for Barnabas even more so, and the sheer amount of dark shadows makes it more than possible for him to explore that question. It makes it essential at a certain point. What else are you going to do with these people for hundreds of hours? They can't drink brandy and talk about a pen forever. For the first time, we really see Barnabas contending with living in the past and present at once, at least for the first time since his arrival and conversion. Just because he's no longer a supernatural man doesn't mean he's immune to feeling the effects of the supernatural. The show opened the time travel can of worms when Barnabas was first unleashed. Unusual time travel, but time travel nonetheless. We are all time travelers in a very similar sense, just in a different scale. One of the reasons the show resonates is that the past is always living with us and living us whether we like it or not. Conventional wisdom tells us not to focus on that. It's pointless. But Barnabas has no choice, and here he's confronted with a chance to do something about it. Will it change him? No, it will change others, and changing others for the better rather than the worse is perhaps one small way he can make cosmic amends. With Nicholas Blair out of the way, Barnabas is on the other side of intimidation. After he smashes the equipment to revive Eve, we see a different character. While the past 30 or so episodes have been a warm-up, now Barnabas at his best and fullest is striding onto the field. It's an appropriately timed immersion, since in the service of taking the baton from the retiring protagonist. Fitting that it should happen in 1796, the year he left his home and the year she finally found hers, both in a life after death after life. The show rarely deals in parallelism and metaphor, but it reaches for something beautifully sophisticated here. Julia takes on the role of parent, telling Barnabas again and again he can't will himself through time. He's about to. Similarly, Barnabas tells the children they can't go to Boston. David becomes a strange conscience conscience for Barnabas when he complains that adults get to do as they please, only to be told it only seems this way. But this clearly sticks with Barnabas as he realizes that he does have free will, and that living a life where it is inhabited is to live the life of an intimidated child. He's not even going to be intimidated by his own past. As we see when he comes as close as possible to outing himself to Stokes, only to be stopped by Julia, coughing commensurate with a sitcom character and a ham-fisted cover-up. This begins a story that both stands independently as a primetime episode and connects the beginning of the series to its eventual resolution. Victoria has come looking for a purpose, and Barnabas will end by finding his in between. They meet. 630 comes roughly halfway through the series. No episode nor arc could be more fitting. This episode was broadcast January 3rd, 1969. Episode 665. Everything's at stake when Barnabas ends his trip to 1795 by saying goodbye to Vicky and hello to sending Angelique back to hell in a fury flammable of just desserts. Barnabas Collins, Jonathan Fripp. Angelique gloats that Vicky will be revived from torpor only to awaken in a coffin, unable to escape. Barnabas, hearing of this, Worley retorts by having a torch-wielding Ben burn her alive. Barnabas then sees Vicky off to her future with Peter Bradford, at peace, happy that she is simply alive. Unable to will himself back to 1968, Barnabas reasons that he must return to the 20th century the way he reached it the first time, in his coffin. As he starts his descent into suspended animation and ensures his coffin back and tri-table are in their full upright position, while his carry-on luggage is stowed under the specular in front of him, Nathan Forbes seemingly stakes him. The challenge of Dark Shadows on both sides of the screen was and is monotony. Soap operas fill the most hours possible with the least amount of story that they can. People may only tune in once a week, certainly. The key demographic, housewives, were taxed with myriad distraction throughout the day in many ways. It is anti-storytelling. The virtue here is not economy nor even detail, but the believability that comes with the intense regular familiarity. That's what makes them feel so strangely realistic. But sometimes even soap operas have to abandon that title rhythm and begrudgingly let one world end and another world begin. Welcome to Terra Nova. Dark Shadows has 6 milestone moments that define its arc, and this is the third, marking the middle of the series in both its episode run and emotional journey. Of course, they return to 1795 for it. This is figuratively where it all began. There is more going on in these 24 minutes of television than 24 entire episodes of the average show. And that's because perhaps there isn't. That's what you get when you finally enjoy the payoff for nearly 450 episodes, giving Barnabas about as much cathartic satisfaction and growth as he's going to be allowed. Sorry if I mispronounced that. It's an invitation to appreciate the 5-act struggle of the series. If everything before Barnabas is Act 1, then this ends Act 2. 665 bookends a story that conceptually begins in 1795 for both Vicky and Barnabas. It ends there as well if the two characters are strange mirrors of each other, orphans out of their native eras. The most crucial parts of their lives begin and end in the overlap. 1795, twice at least. The first act of Dark Shadows introduces Victoria. The second introduces Barnabas and forces on their interaction with 1795, focuses on their interaction with 1795 as a fulcrum for both of them. For him, the arc actually begins with her first trip to 1795. It also ends in the most appropriate yet unlikely of places. In her second trip to 1795, during his second journey there as well, after Vicky finally departs with Peter Bradford to no doubt die of dysentery on the western frontier, which was probably New Hampshire, we look at the other unstuck time traveler, Barnabas, perhaps to see what kind of humanizing effect she had on him. He once again has to say goodbye to a woman he ostensibly loves. But this time it is willingly. This is a prodigian leap for a man from his era. Few have suffered as much as he has in the pursuit of love, and his newfound sense of easy confidence evidences one of his greatest transformations. Although fate again thrust him to 1795, Barnabas begins the conclusion of Act 3 in 1897. It's as if he keeps returning for a reset, like some sort of perverse variation on Groundhog Day, with differences. In 665, he returns to his point of origin to demonstrate emotional mastery. At the end of 1897, he returns to see that he is the master of nothing. Forces far larger than he make a mockery, and perhaps even a macarena of his well-earned autonomy. And why does this happen? Why is it important? Is it so ridicule what he has accomplished? Perhaps, but perhaps some of it alleviates him of responsibility. Yes, absolutely, he is a captain of his own ship and master of his own maturity? Maturity? Yeah, we get it. And that's just Ducky. However, too much reliance on that mentality can lead to total devastation. It forces genuinely beyond your control, have conflicting plans. That makes us into Act 4, where Barnabas becomes even more of a storm-tossed ship first as a lamb-chop tick puppet composed of a sock seemingly worn by a robust actor, William Conrad, over a week in August. It concludes in Gerard's Siege of Collingwood in 1970. The demonstration to Barnabas that that while he may have control of himself, he has no control beyond. So, 1840's Act 5 is a chance to reconcile self-control, while accepting that he has human limits. What's left? The necessity of trust. He chooses to trust Angelique as much as he trusts Julia, and overcomes his most tragic flaw, a resistance to forgive. primarily himself, of course. Forgiveness is easy to muster when you and the other person have hundreds of years to evolve after the inciting incident. His reward? Angelique shot and killed. And you know that's a thing. I think we can all admit it. And she is shot by a Trask, seeking revenge for the death of a father he didn't even know. This proves that carrying a grudge at some point is more of a hobby than a righteous cause. That's what it was for Barnabas. It's certainly what it had become for Angelique. And it's over the course of the 1840 storyline that we see her realize it and give it up. And that's the story of Dark Shadows. Episode 665 shows Angelique at the opposite end of her own forgiveness spectrum. We can buy a certain amount of infuriated jealousy, but at this point, Josette is dead, so that's out of the way. Cross that one off the to-do list. Naomi is dead. Nathan Forbes is finally in a dance battle. Everyone is pretty miserable. So you would think that Angelique's work is done. But like Sammy topping music with trick shooting and celebrity impressions at the Coconut Grove, she has to murder Vicky twice. Hanging, of course, because, tradition. And then she has to plan on reviving her inside a coffin to die all over again. Why? I guess because Barnabas loves the gal or something. But the fact that Vicky's running off of Roger Davis should be punishment enough for Barnabas. It's not like he has a shot. No, here she is drunk on evil to an extent that would have shamed Herbert Loom in a latter Colossi movie. Perhaps Angelique has to be that evil. Mechanically, because they want to reverse engineer this whole thing to justify the incredible Fantasy Island moment when Barnabas opens the door so that Ben Stokes, who's been waiting with a torch for Christ knows how long, can light her up. It's a great moment. Despite our love for Angelique, there's nevertheless something satisfying on it. Because we know she'll be back. She's just going to go to hell for a little while and then show up in 1897 with a considerable improved attitude, I might add. They all know this by now. I mean, I was surprised that Barnabas didn't pack a lunch for her, like Charlie's wife, handing him a sandwich on her endless MTA of inequality. It's not really an execution, it's just calling the Uber a little early. That moment and the sentimental moments between Barnabas and Ben later are necessary reminders about this hero. We meet him as a lone agent out of time, defined by the friends who can never truly understand him. As unflagging as Julie and Willie are, they are constant reminders that he is not home. Not really. In 665, we are warmed and saddened to learn why. There is something truly grounding about this stranger, normally stranded in a strange land in the company of his best friend, someone that no one in the 20th century, save Vicky, knows. It puts his character into context and it puts his heroism into context. And it puts his loneliness into context. And maybe that's ultimately why 1795 is such a nexus. Ben Stokes has as life becomes increasingly monstrous, Ben rises to the challenge and ever greater humanity with ever greater humanity, he's both a servant, like Vicky, and an occasionally ruthless man of action with a heart the size of Canada, like Barnabas. Maybe 1795 isn't home. Maybe Collingwood and the old house are not home. Maybe Ben Stokes is home. Seen like that, I understand why Barnabas feels so alone without him. This episode was broadcast January 10th, 1969. Chapter 4, guys. So I ended chapter 3, and this is the start of chapter 4. 1969, Abyss. Night has fallen over the great house of Collinwood. All the knights, bright and beautiful, are in the offing. Yes, yes, Victoria is gone away. And at just about the halfway point, Dark Shadows is in constant transition. So it's very hard to plant a flag, die on a hill, and say that this is it, which I love to do. Anyway, like the real life, that is a pale reflection of the truth of Dark Shadows. The only it is change. And yet there is such a thing as distance from the destination, and as we get closer and closer, essentials become apparent. Barnabas has been more than the leading man for some time. He's been the troubled and doubt-ridden hero. But we can ignore that uncomfortable truth as long as Vicky is around. Barnabas is the kidnapping, brainwashing, Collinsport strangling heavy, right? Yes, and FDR was allegedly complicit in our lack of preparation for the Pearl Harbor attack. Your point is, he's still one of history's greatest heroes. So was Roosevelt. Omelets are broken. Eggs, gentle reader, grab a fork, Barnabas has a brother to meet and redeem in the fantastic future of 1897. Episode 688. When David begins writing stories about men with strange urges and unusual hair, is he of a certain age or just possessed by the occult? Ned Stewart, Roger Davis. Ned Stewart arrives at Collinwood seeking information on Chris Jennings, an old acquaintance of whom he is strongly antipathic. David, manipulated by Quentin's song, writes a story of a man who becomes a wolf. He then goes to the mausoleum to open the door that protects Chris. The real phantoms in Dark Shadows are the metaphorical phantom limbs represented by absent, missing, or neglectful family members. At times, they seem to outnumber the characters who show up, and their influence quietly resonates throughout the series. I wish I could attribute this to the revealing emotional wounds of the author, because it was ongoingly crafted by committee. This is a frustration impossibly, but it may have an even greater significance considering how many people and perspectives were involved in the production. It may be something shared and important about the community behind Dark Shadows. Everything works at the home of Collinwood, except for what they claim to hold dear: family. Victoria is looking for parents. Carolyn is missing a father. David is missing a mother. Barnabas a fiance, and then there are those who try to take the place of those absent or who find themselves cast in those parts. Julia, for instance, who is neither Josette nor Ben, is ultimately Jeremiah. Part of him, anyway, as far as Barnabas is concerned. In 688, missing family and surrogate family primitate the action. They're present on both sides, and only at the climax do they threaten to collide. Ned is avenging his sister, a woman robbed from his life by a catatonia resulting from witnessing Chris's transformation. On his part, Chris is an asset to family wherever he goes. If inadvertently, By turns, he is absent, missing, and neglectful. He shows up at Collinsport after his twin brother dies, making him a living reminder of missing family. His cousin Joe is on his way. He is rarely in his sister's life. It may be for her own good, but she has no idea. So, between a grieving Ned and a both grieving and grief infecting Chris, we get David by way of Quentin, one arguably driven by a paternal neglect, one driven by a curse, untimely resulting from abandoning a pregnant wife and by default becoming a neglectful parent. Dark Shadows can be a harsh Victorian noir universe. Sorry. It doesn't care about what you know and don't know, or what you meant to do. It cares about what you did, and whatever you do, don't do it to a gypsy. This entire strain of family misery can be traced to a gypsy curse, and that was triggered by a Collins, Quentin, a man whose spirit is now becoming David's father figure. It's the ghost of a man responsible for a son's death, becoming an almost fatherless boy's puppet master, and striving to eliminate the last descendant recipient of the curse his actions initiated. Chris Jennings, a man with no idea he's a Collins. The figure of the gypsy spikes briefly on Dark Shadows, but the significance is quietly seismic. Although they cause intense misery for Quentin and others, they do so in defense of family. They represent absolute familial dedication, and between Patofe and Quentin, they do not care for bachelors. They may not have a home, but they have hearts as strong and impenetrable as iron when it comes to their relatives. Not only do they menace the Collins family, but they also shame them by implication. Compared to the Ricochet tribe, Collinwood is like the Golden Corral of clan cannibalism. It's little bit bill and betrayal, and most parents would secretly sell their kids for the right offer. It's classic WASP culture, where family often results from antiseptic obligation, rather than the earthier drives of passion or good old-fashioned religious guilt. If the writers and crew share anything, it's a well-represented WASP background. Dark Shadows talks about a lot of things, but the fall from a WASP upbringing is one of them. Even with an Irish name and a pesty of a religious life, few are as waspy as the Collinses. It's a tart commentary on an entire swathe of America that's usually taken for granted or not spoken of. Maybe because of the illusion of uniquely inequality, maybe because it repression prevents it. And repression and codes of silence are two hallmarks of WASP behavior. The suggestion is that within the bedrock of what we think of as the American aristocracy is a fundamental untrustworthiness. What should you be able to trust? Family. What should always be there? Family. Yet in Collinsport, your emotional well-being and for some very life expectancy can be measured in degrees of separation between you and the founders. Whether they knew it or not, the writers are revealing and perhaps exorcising the demons of a culture that claims to have none. In this case, Secrets That Keeps Getting Out is symbolic of the cosmic wasp culture nightmare. A werewolf, the ultimately familiar animal, existing in packs, lying under the skin, literally a dog, driven by guttural impulses, a creature with late night stirrings that make brunch impossible, the very symbol of impurity. You can fill in the blanks for any non WASP group that may be sparking today's round of Protestant paranoia. No matter how long since they've moved into Collinwood, that family may never run out of things to unpack. This episode was broadcast February 12th. Oh, what did I do? Sorry, this episode was broadcast February 12th, 1969. Okay, guys, I'm going to stop right there because that is the beginning of Chapter 4, and I'll be back later tonight with another read-along. Hope you guys enjoyed this read-along for the Dark Shadows Daybook Unbound, written by Patrick McRae. Guys, if you want to go get this is really, really good and entertaining. I'm enjoying this. This is a lot of fun. My favorite so far has been Adam. I mean, to me, look, I love David Selby's Quentin Collins. I love the character, but Adam is one of the most unappreciated characters in Dark Shadows, in my opinion. But I love what Patrick's take was on him in this book so far. Great stuff. I mean, really, really good. If you know nothing about Dark Shadows, you could easily pick this book up and know and learn a lot about it and be entertained at the same time. It's as well written, if not more so, than the first book. I'm really enjoying it. Um, Link will be in the description box where you can go get this on Amazon. It's currently available for Kindle. I'll see you guys later tonight.